Hi, we're Tony Northrup and we're wearing a terrible shirt today to test out Moire on 4 of the latest Canon cameras, especially the Canon 70D, which is really exciting for those of us who shoot video with our DSLRs. So the video that you're seeing here is coming from, of course, the new 70D, as well as basically the top end for most of us, Canon 5D Mark III. We also have the 7D, which the 70D, I feel like it's completely replacing, and the 5D Mark II, which I know so many videographers rely upon. So I haven't seen the results of this video yet, so I'm just gonna move around a little bit and give myself a chance to kind of voice over which of these cameras is doing the best. The 70D has about the same Moire as the 5D Mark II or the 7D. The 5D Mark III is still the clear winner. I will point out that all these cameras are currently set to ISO 200. They're shooting at 1/30th of a second at f4. Now I'm using different lenses because I don't happen to have 4 of the identical lenses, but they're all basically the kit lenses that came with the cameras, and I think you should be able to go by the results pretty well. So I am going to change out of this terrible shirt and put on my uniform, and we can go on to the next test. So now we'll move right into the low light test. Now these cameras all are set at ISO 800 and f8. So we should start to see some more noise, especially in the shadow areas like in my jacket or maybe some of the objects behind me. Now, I am going to talk more about shadow noise, but first I want to go back to Moire because I want to give you some time to actually study the video coming from the different cameras at different ISOs. Moire is this weird effect that happens when there are tight patterns, and it's one of the characteristics that differentiates DSLR video from true video camera video. Now, Moire is exceptionally easy to avoid. You just tell the person that you're filming not to wear a checkered or striped shirt. And you'll notice, except when I'm testing Moire, I don't wear one of those shirts. But you'll also see it sometimes in the natural world, especially with like brick buildings or other patterns that might occur in nature. So if you're really serious about your videography, it's something to think about. But I know from my previous test with the 6D, I had a lot of people saying they weren't going to get the 6D because it had just very slightly more Moire than the Canon 5D Mark III, which was twice as expensive. And I think those people are overestimating the importance of Moire. I don't think it's a big deal. Usually as a videographer, you just schedule things like shirts around it. Here we are at ISO 3200 and f16 on these cameras, and we're going to see more and more noise as we continue to climb up on the ISOs. Now, if you're interested in finding out more about why higher ISOs make more noise and the types of differences that you'll see between the crop sensor cameras like the 70D or the 7D and the full frame cameras like the 5D Mark III or the 6D, I would suggest you check out my free and brand new DSLR buyer's guide. Head on over to sdpcommunity.com, and you don't need to make an account or anything. Just go right to the buyer's guide menu there and you'll be able to browse it. So in particular, I would have you check out Chapter 2, which is my frequently asked questions. These are questions and answers I've compiled from the thousands and thousands of questions I've gotten from readers of my book, Stunning Digital Photography. I would also suggest you check out the DSLR Buyer's Guide because not only is it all about camera bodies and all the different technologies and what everything means, but there's a section in there just about video and using DSLRs for video. The Lens Buyer's Guide has a section that tells you which lenses are good for video and which are not. So check that out, and please use the links in it to buy your gear because that gives me a few pennies and that will allow me to keep the buyer's guide free. If nobody uses those links, I'll have to start charging for it. So I mentioned that we were at ISO 3200 for this segment, and you should go ahead and watch this in 1080p and peer really closely, but the dark areas especially, to see how the noise is varying between the different cameras. So let's jump up to the next ISO setting. So here we are at ISO 6400 and f22, and here we're really going to see some difference between the crop bodies like the 70D and the 7D and the full frame bodies like the 5D Mark II and the 5D Mark III. Now, if you're wondering if it's really worth it to you, I can't really answer that question because it depends largely on your budget. If you need to be filming in low light situations or you need a really high f-stop number to get a long depth of field, well, you might need to invest in a full frame body. Now the 5D Mark III is an awesome full frame video camera, but the 5D Mark II used, nowadays I see it going used on eBay for $1,000 to $1,200. And that's a remarkable bargain for a capable full frame video camera, so I would suggest you check that out. If you look in chapter 2 of my buyer's guide at sdpcommunity.com, you'll find I give you a whole lot of tips for getting good deals and finding the best bargains on eBay, especially for used bodies, while keeping yourself safe and not losing too much money. And if you're interested in how I'm using aperture and ISO and all those different camera settings, if you haven't mastered that yet, check out chapter 4 in my book, Stunning Digital Photography, which you can buy at sdpcommunity.com, Amazon, or Barnes & Noble, or just about anywhere. And here we are at ISO 12,800. Things are getting really noisy, aren't they? Now this isn't an ISO that you would use every day, and you probably wouldn't normally use it in a studio like this, but if you're shooting a concert, if you're shooting indoor sports, or if you're like me and you're showing people how to do night photography, this is a pretty useful ISO. Now the large format cameras like the 5D Mark II, the 5D Mark III, the 6D, they just have more area to collect light. So their megapixel count isn't really any different from the 7D or the 70D that we're testing today, but each of those pixels is bigger, quite a bit bigger. That just means they're collecting more photons, and that gives them more information. With the smaller sensors, they're getting fewer photons, and that means the camera has to make more guesses about what individual pixels should be. Now we're at ISO 25,600, and of the 4 cameras I have here, only the 5D Mark III supports this high ISO. The Canon 6D will also support it and will provide very similar video to the 5D Mark III. In my own testing, I couldn't tell any difference, so I'm not going to show both those different cameras. Now the 7D, the 70D and the 5D Mark II don't support this ISO natively. So what I've done is I've used the same settings, which are f22, 1/125th, and their maximum ISO, and then I'm pulling it up in post. So I'm basically doubling the brightness of it, and that's gonna exaggerate all the noise in them. So this isn't a native ISO that you would see on these cameras, but what are you gonna do? If you have to film in a really dark environment, then you'll simply have no choice but to get an underexposed picture and then try to try to adjust it in post. So I know some people are going to complain, oh, they don't support it, it's not fair that you compared them, but I just want to give those people who might need to film in dark environments a good idea of what they're getting. So now that our low light tests are done, and hopefully you've drawn some conclusions, let's move on to our next tests. Now for the rolling shutter test. So hold on, because my cameraman Justin is going to start moving the camera back and forth, just panning back and forth. Go ahead, Justin. And what you're going to see here is that this bookcase behind me, instead of being nice and straight, it's going to be tilting to the side. And this is a problem called rolling shutter. And if you're interested in more information, check out my buyer's guide at sdpcommunity.com, specifically the DSLR buyer's guide. So that was the 70D, and now I'll switch over to the much more expensive 5D Mark III. As you can see, Justin is starting to move it here, and you probably won't see any difference. That's because rolling shutter isn't a feature that gets better or worse with buying a higher end body. No, it just has to do with the DSLR design. And if you want to get rid of rolling shutter, you pretty much have to buy a dedicated video camera, like the awesome black Magic cameras, which also take the Canon lenses. So if you're serious about video and not stills, I would suggest you go towards those, because no matter which DSLR you use, Canon, Nikon, anything, they're all going to have that same rolling shutter problem. So for this test, I'm going to compare the ability of the different cameras to focus on a foreground subject and then on a background subject. And this actually comes up a whole lot in the type of video that I shoot, because I might want to show a product in my hands, like this beautiful example of the Moire RB67 with a Polaroid back. That has been my current obsession for the last couple of months. So right now, my cameraman Justin is focused on my face, but I'm going to have him focus on the camera. And this involves him scrolling down and moving the focusing point with the little thumb dial in the back of the 5D Mark III, and then pressing the AF on button, and then the camera probably hunts around a little bit. So Justin, were we able to get it focused on the...
Yeah,
all right.
It looks good with the camera.
So now, Justin, go ahead and focus back on my face. This is a common technique in videography, whether you're demonstrating a product Or perhaps there's a conversation going on between two people and you might focus on the person in the foreground and then the person in the background. And honestly, you just can't really do it with modern DSLRs, at least not using the autofocus system. The technique you have to rely on is what they call a focus puller. And you have to hook up this ridiculous gadget to the lens, and usually you have a second person working it. So the second person, the focus puller, will be working this little gear, and they have to be like very careful and precise, and it's a trade. Like you have to spend years just mastering this ability of focus pulling. But I think the 70D is going to be much better at it, so let's look at that camera now. So now we're going to do the same test with the Canon 70D, and of course I have the same lens, so I had to back the camera way off, and that's going to change the depth of field a little bit, but you should be able to still see plenty of blur. So the 70D nicely focused on my face automatically because it's got this fantastic camera or face tracking. So I'm going to have my camera Justin now just touch the camera on the touchscreen display, and as you can see, it instantly focuses on the camera. Now go ahead and switch back to my face. How amazing is that? Focus on a book behind me. There you go, it just switches automatically. And tell you what, focus back on the camera and watch this. It will automatically track the camera. Even though it's not a face, it will track it as it moves around. So it seems to be able to track faces or things that aren't faces. So that's really, it's a really, really remarkable thing. So let's go on to the next test, which is going to show that off even more. For this test, we're going to break down the fourth wall a little bit and show Justin, my cameraman, working our Canova slider here to get a product shot. Now, this is useful for showing close-ups and making them more interesting than just a static shot. So now let's take a look at the footage. I might use this while talking about a product. I could say like, oh, this is a Russian Fed 3 camera from Soviet Russia in the early to mid 60s. So now Justin's gonna do the same slider test with the Canon 70D. And you'll notice he's put both hands on the handle now. He doesn't have to have a separate hand on the focus ring because the 70D is just working its magic. It automatically will focus on the camera. All you have to do is touch that touch screen once and it basically remembers what the camera is and tracks it throughout the motion. So this makes his job much easier. This allows him to focus on the panning and the tilting and the sliding. So I think we're gonna get much, much better results out of the 70D for this. Justin's gonna get a few more takes with the slider. We are going to head outside so we can test out the autofocusing system with a moving car, faster subject, and a moving Tony as I walk along the beach. These are other types of shots that I've always wanted to do, but the DSLR video cameras that I use just weren't up to the task. So I'm going to be comparing the 70D against the 7D that I feel the 70D really replaces. But the lessons learned from the 70D or the 5D Mark III in here apply to basically every other DSLR video camera in the world because they all have a very similar focusing capability. They're all a little terrible. They basically don't have autofocus while recording. The 70D is really the first camera that truly has usable autofocus capabilities, at least the first DSLR. Of course, video cameras, proper video cameras, have had these capabilities for a long time, but it's a new feature for the DSLR world. So let's get into the sunshine and check it out there. Here we see the 70D's dual pixel AF does a really good job of tracking the car, even though the car is in the shade and it's black. These are things that make it a little more difficult. It's not a perfect job of keeping up, but it does a pretty good job. The 70's autofocus system is completely incapable of keeping up with the car. And I'd also like you to listen to the on-camera audio, which sounds absolutely terrible. On the 70D, you're completely unable to hear the autofocusing or the image stabilization.
I've brought Justin to the beach to test the handholdability of the kit lens, the 18-1.5, and to test the ability of it to track my movement using the face tracking feature. You're also hearing the on-camera sound, which isn't going to sound good because we don't have a lav mic going, but this is what it sounds like outside. So here we're testing the handholdability of the lens, as well as Justin's capability to hold that big heavy 70-200 f2.8, and we're also tracking the face tracking ability of this lens.
as I move closer and closer to it. Should give you a really nice background blur, but keep me mostly in focus. So this is my cameraman Justin, who was doing most of the behind the scenes work, and so I wanted to get his impressions on how it was going too. What'd you think?
As far as the 70D goes, I loved it. The autofocus was great, especially with moving objects. When you're on the beach coming at me, it just would not unlock out of place at any point. And I really thought that was a pretty cool feature.
And besides the test that you've seen here, I've just been using it on a day-to-day basis as like the handy cam. And I've kind of liked it. It works really well. It's lightweight. I can throw it over my shoulder and I don't even think about it. I did some video at my niece's soccer game, and the focusing kept up really well. Whereas with my other SLRs, I would have had to just use a really high f-stop number to get lots of depth of field, or I would have been trying to, you know, either manually focus it or use the terrible contrast-based focusing, and it just wouldn't have worked well with action. You'll see in some of those shots that rolling shutter is really prominent as I'm trying to pan really quickly. That's a pain with any of the DSLRs, but the focusing system has been really, really great. So about the Moire test, I think we decided that it was about the same as the full frame cameras of the 5D Mark III.
Yeah, I didn't notice a huge difference one way or the other, except for when it came to the LCD panel there. It did look significantly sharper on the 70D, but that may just be because of the newer technology.
Yeah, and you know what, if you're that concerned about Moire, you're going to get a dedicated video camera because none of the DSLRs are going to be perfect at it.
Yeah, that's true.
In the low light video test, the 70D really held up, and as far as I could tell, it was the king of the compact sensors anyway.
Yeah, it was noticeably better. It is obviously a newer model, so they may have come up with some, I think you were saying, better algorithms?
Yeah, my theory is that it's mostly a software-based thing. You know, you don't get the option to shoot raw video, unfortunately, so you're relying on the camera's ability to process that raw data into the video file. So I think they just changed the algorithm a little bit to get rid of some of that noise at high ISOs. But however it works, it seems to work, and it seems to be beating the 7D and the 60D and every other compact camera. It's not going to keep up with the full frame cameras. It can't physically. It's got
That's
a smaller
right.
sensor. So if you're really concerned about low light noise, if you're shooting concerts or childbirths or something that might happen in a dim room, then I think you're going to want to go full frame. But for most purposes, the 70D, even in low light, is a really good camera.
Yeah, absolutely.
So how about that dual pixel AF? Oh my God, right?
Yeah, it's awesome.
And it just opens up so many more possibilities for us as videographers. And I'm confident in future shoots we'll be using it, and you'll be seeing much more interesting videos because we'll be able to do sliding shots and moving shots and walking shots. We'll be able to use shallow depth of field. These are things we couldn't do before. They're things that the 5D Mark III at more than twice the price can't do. And in fact, no other DSLR can do it. So I'm excited about it.
Yeah, I really thought it was great. Excellent investment, and I'm just still amazed at how it keeps things in focus, especially things that are really fast or just coming right at the camera. There was nothing to be disappointed about it. So.
Yeah, and if you're doing solo work, if you just have the camera on a tripod and you're talking to it, and I do a lot of this myself, you can finally use shallow depth of field. You can put on that cheapo, fantastic plastic 51.8, set it to 1.8, and just turn on the face tracking. And then just go to town, because it's gonna keep your face in focus. And even the non-STM lenses, we tested the STM and the non-STM lenses, even the non-STM lenses worked smoothly and quietly. So you can get that short depth of field even when you're working alone, and you don't need somebody else there to focus on your face. So Justin did a lot of hand holding out there. I know that's important to a lot of people. How did it feel hand holding that?
I really liked it, Tony. The 70D was excellent. It seemed noticeably lighter than some of the other larger models, the Canon 5D or the 6D even, and
what about that kit lens image stabilization?
right, the kit lens image stabilization that it came with, it was just really not a bad option at all. I have very few bad things to say about this as far as mobility and how light it is and everything. I liked it a lot.
Yeah, I found that I'm using the 18 to 135 kit lens, which is the more expensive of the two kit lens options that they have. But not only was it a great range, but it zooms nice and smoothly. You can't hear it autofocusing at all, even when you're on the on-camera mic.
Yeah, it's super
So
quiet.
yeah, I love that kit lens, and I do highly recommend it. It's the lens to get if you're going to be using the 70D for video. And I will suggest, if you like this camera, and I'm not trying to sell you on the camera, I'm going to tell you the positive and the negative, but please use the links in the description below, because that just helps support me. I get like a few pennies out of every dollar if you buy it through one of my links, and I promise I will spend that money on new gear to review. You know, Canon, nobody's sending me anything for free. I only do reviews of the gear that I'm using. So these are all real world reviews of somebody who needs to use the gear, but I could use your help. So use the links in the description below. Another exciting feature about the 70D is the touch screen. So what was your experience using that?
I found the touchscreen really helpful when familiarizing myself with this particular Canon. You know, I'm still wasn't sure where the buttons were placed, especially being a new model. But this touchscreen's great. You can just navigate around with the greatest of ease, and amateurs and pros alike will probably like it quite a bit if you're not just a dedicated button user.
Yeah, and you know, for focusing, it was pretty amazing. You can just touch any part of the screen and the focus will just jump there. Compared to like the 5D Mark III, like you can move the focusing point, but you have to like move this joystick around, and when you do that, it shakes the whole camera.
Yeah.
But you can just really lightly touch the camera, and it won't move the camera or shake it or anything like that. I also loved the articulating screen. Like this is really important for a video camera. Because sometimes you're holding the camera down low and getting a shot, or you're holding it over your head. Or if you're filming yourself, you want to be able to flip that screen around so you can see it.
That's right, yeah.
Yeah, so on the other cameras, I've had to use this big, expensive, heavy external LCD display if I wanted some other angle, but it's really convenient to be able to use it on the 70D. That's something that the 7D lacks, the 5D Mark III lacks, the 6D lacks. That you have to go to either the 60D or like the T3, T4, T5i models to get the articulating screen. But for video, it's great. It really helps out a lot.
Yeah, it's an excellent option, and I'm glad that Canon added this to their 70D.
Another thing a lot of people asked about was the length of the video recording time, because if you have a Canon 60D or 7D or a 5D Mark II, they all shut off after like 10 minutes.
What's up with that? Why do they have it set up that way?
It was some
It's
weird
just...
like European law that I guess they changed now.
Oh, really?
Or something,
Okay.
because they would be taxed at a higher rate if it was a proper video camera.
I see.
And then I think the law changed. The newer cameras don't have this artificial restriction anymore. But I'll tell you what, we've still been using the 5D Mark II a lot, and it screws up our workflow because we're filming instructional DVDs right now. Check those out. And they go on for an hour, and we'd have to set a timer for every 10 minutes and then stop all the cameras and restart them all around this stupid restriction. So the 70D goes up to half an hour, and I can't record for half an hour straight, so I think that's plenty of time for me.
Yeah, I think that a lot of videographers out there will find it quite helpful, though. Absolutely.
Another question, a lot of people asked how the on-camera audio was. So what did you think, Justin?
Well, kind of like all the other mics that are built into the Canon units, it wasn't particularly great. I mean, it did the job, but it's not something you'd want to use in a Blu-ray production or anything like that.
Yeah, the audio sucks. It sucks in every camera. It sucks whether it's a DSLR or something else.
Right.
I'll say it's okay in that you can't really hear the autofocus motor churning. You don't hear the image stabilization when you're hand holding it, whereas you really can hear that on some of the other cameras. So I think it's isolated, but you're going to want to use an external mic almost all the time, as we always do. I use lav mics, and that's ideal if you have somebody talking like this and you can put a mic on them. Otherwise, you can get like a shotgun mic and either mount it to the flash or put it on a boom if you're chasing somebody around. But yeah, I guess the on-camera's audio is as good as it's going to get, but it's not good.
Right, yeah, yeah. I guess it's better than nothing, but
Yeah.
even an inexpensive external mic, like you're saying, is going to be light years beyond the camera mic. So
I'll say we use the on-camera audio for syncing, you know, between multiple cameras, and yeah, it works fine with that if you're doing professional video multi-camera productions.
Yeah.
All right, so in summary, what do you think? Thumbs up, thumbs down?
I thought it was a great camera, a great SLR camera, particularly good if you're going to be doing a lot of video. However, if you're focusing on pictures and you're taking a lot of nighttime photography, or you just need something with the larger sensor, you may want to consider another camera, but not if you're a real videographer, probably.
Yeah, the full frame cameras like the 6D and the 5D Mark III are always going to have some advantages.
Yeah.
And yeah, you know what? If you're shooting video all the time, you need a video camera.
Yeah.
I use DSLRs because I am first and foremost a photographer, and then the video thing, well, gotten serious about it, but yeah, that's always second to me. But if I were just shooting documentaries or making films, I'd give myself, I love the Blackmagics in particular, but there are lots of, Sony has amazing video cameras. So consider something outside the DSLR world. And I'll say, for more information about using DSLR cameras as video and which cameras to get, check out the buyer's guide at sdpcommunity.com. It's free for now, and if you make an account, you can participate in the equipment forums that you'll find on the homepage there. So we have separate forums for Canon and Nikon and Micro Four Thirds and other types of camera questions. So I'd love to have your questions posted there because I'll be answering them as well as other readers. Now, you'll notice there are some forums there about portrait photography, landscapes, and other things. That's a private community for readers of my other book, Stunning Digital Photography. So if you're interested in still photography as well, do check out my book. You can buy it at Amazon or wherever, but if you buy it directly from sdpcommunity.com, you'll automatically get access to the ebook like instantly, whether you buy the paperback or ebook, and you'll get access to all those forums and lots of other downloads and goodies. So I hope you'll check it out. Thanks so much. And don't forget to give me a subscribe so you see the future videos that'll come out. And if you like the video, please click like down below. Thanks.
Thank you, everyone.